Hey you want to play Soulframe early? Well, here's your chance. Grab a drink and some snacks and stick around till the end of the video to learn more. Soulframe, the sister game to Digital Extreme's famous Warframe. A game that has been surrounded by some mystery up until a few days ago when I was lucky enough to get some codes sent my way allowing me to enter the Soulframe Preludes, a pre-alpha state of the game where players can test the current content that's available and offer feedback. Of course, this is all in an attempt to have the community be involved in the development of the game and help out with suggestions as well as ironing out the kinks. In this video, I'm going to take a look at what content is available currently in Soulframe. Spoilers, there's not much yet. I'll take a look at the story, the world, the gameplay, and after I've had my fill of that, I'll be going into what I think about the game, what I like, what I dislike, and what I think can be done to improve the experience. By the way, you can and should expect that most of the issues I will raise will be excused simply based on the fact that Soulframe is in pre-alpha right now. I cannot stress this enough. This is not a finished game. It's not a beta, it's not even an alpha, it's a pre-alpha. And with that out of the way, here we go. Starting off at the beginning, the game opens up with your character literally naked, cuffed and sitting lifelessly on a stool. A figure walks into view holding a book and a giant mace. The figure tells you to remember that you are a family, after which said family swiftly proceeds to bash your head in. You end up washing ashore in some unknown land where a badass moose picks you up and revives you, after which it just goes adios and leaves you to your own devices. This is where you're allowed to tweak a few of your character's characteristics, your stats, which are called virtues, the gear that you'll wear, the weapon you'll wield, as well as the pact you'll make, which is basically the class or warframe that you will be playing as. There's no point wasting too much time here like I did, since at least for the pre-alpha, everything can be changed later on. Even the stat points you used can be refunded at any point in time and reassigned to your liking. I did like, however, that depending on your stat assignment, you'll get a different title, like how putting most of your stats in Grace will end up making you a Rogue Disaphine. This doesn't affect your character in any way from what I can tell, it's just a little bit of flavor to add to the experience. Afterwards, you wake up and now what? Preludes offers very little guidance outside of the bare minimum. It tells you about your guiding sparrow, this bird that will lead you to any objectives you may have, the revive shrines where you'll be respawning after death, and the Nighthold, which will serve as your base, or for you Warframe players out there, it'll serve as your orbiter, minus any of Ordis's commentary. You'll be able to come and go from the Nightfold at your leisure to change your pact, loadout, and stat distribution, as well as talk to any NPCs or ancestors, as they're called, that you find out in the world and recruit. Outside of these three elements though, you won't be getting much direction as to what you're supposed to do. So off we go, striding across the realm in search of something. After running around the map for a good 10 minutes, the map shows a marker, and once close enough to it, we get this notification in the top left saying to to Dermac. Damn it, I always do that. It's here that we encounter our first dungeon, which took about 30 minutes to complete. Dungeons are fairly simple. You run around a randomly generated dungeon layout made from certain tile sets, fulfill whatever objective you have inside while dispatching enemies and looting whatever resources you can find along the way. Completion of the main objective will reward you with resources and experience. There are also puzzles you can find within, but I must have been unlucky as I either haven't had any of these spawns in my dungeons or I just missed them outright. After running dungeons for some time, I realized that said dungeons became quite large with huge areas to explore, and if I wanted to make sure I searched every nook and cranny for loot, it would take me about an hour to finish. Having already gotten a good grasp of what dungeon delving is like, I began looking for something else to do, so I started running around the world, which by the way looks quite stunning, and aside from the odd enemy camp and random event spawns here and there wasn't much to do. Eventually, I did find my way to one of the points of interest marked on the map, all written in these strange runes, and discovered one of the ancestors, named Orlick. I was tasked with returning the quill he had lost, and afterwards, I was informed that he could now be found in the Nighthold. Before I talk more about Orlick, I should probably mention that around each of these points of interest, there will be this glowing yellow sphere just floating about. Collecting these will allow you to decipher some of the runes for that point of interest, and if you can collect enough, you'll be able to actually read the entire thing. Now, back to Orlick. He will act as your lore database, and with each yellow sphere you collect, a new lore entry will be available, offering more information about certain locations or characters in the game. I didn't think much of this initially and just assumed this is all for the sake of building up the world of Soulframe so that we would have a better understanding of the world and thus better sense of immersion. Imagine my surprise when, after unlocking a specific lore entry, I leave the Nightfold only to be met with a cutscene that also started an entire questline. This leads me to believe that unlocking new lore entries will become a necessary part of the gameplay loop, at least in the early parts of the game, and since they'll be so important, I should let you know that these spheres only spawn once an in-game day, which roughly translates to about an hour of real time. Since I didn't have much else to do, I decided to follow the new questline, and I was very pleased with the look and feel of Soulframe's story progression. We walk around till we find a camp of enemies, we take them down, and find a little captured critter called Avocot that we promptly release. It's here that we get a quick glimpse at what looks to be dialogue options based on your character's virtues. He gives us a lead on where to go, and it's back to Dermak again to find a totem. Funnily enough, after quite a bit of time playing the pre-alpha, it's in this questline that we actually get 2 more tutorials on throwing your weapon and activating Spectral Sight. I really think this should have been popping up on my screen much earlier, as I had no idea you could throw your weapon for the first few hours of me playing. It's also here that we discover the Fire King, Fen Yotar, who is the one responsible for the construction of the Undercity of Dermak. We absorb his soul, which allows us to summon forth this cool-looking flaming sword, which is quite powerful and capable of dispatching enemies easily. However, after completing the dungeon, we are separated from Fen Yotar as he makes his way to the Nightfold. Ever since, that flaming sword has been forever out of our reach. But on we go to put the totem we found to good use. We have a vision of a child interacting with a fawn, and following the visions, we discover a new dungeon called the Glades of Andurin, with a different tileset from what we're used to from Dermak. We dispatch a few enemies and find the woman from our vision earlier, Lady Deora, who is corrupting this stag. She recognizes us as a traitor and a boss fight ensues. While the fight ends with our victory, we don't actually kill her. Instead, we pull her within the Nightfold, where she is submerged beneath its waters and reborn as the child she once was. Realization hits Lady Deora and she becomes crestfallen, but we can't deal with her just yet as the stag from earlier is now fully corrupted and on a rampage. The stag fight is actually quite the spectacle, and I was already fully immersed thanks to the soundtrack adding that extra gravitas to the already bleak-looking scenario. But again, victory is ours, and we heal the stag of its corruption even if it's got a bit of an attitude towards us. There's a bit of exposition, and after that we're given the stag's blessing and unlock a new set of gear. With that, the questline ends as abruptly as it started, and I'm left to return to the overworld. That marks about all content types currently available in this version of the pre-alpha, so let's move on and talk a bit about the story. The story of Soulframe is something I'm very interested in. It's already got me hooked because of how unique the setting is. You are a member of the Ode'n faction that was exiled and cast out as a traitor for reasons that are as of yet unclear to us. The Ode'n seem to have their society built in the literal skies and are maintaining their way of living by polluting and siphoning the vitality of the realm. This leads to nature being understandably enraged. Actually, I should stop calling it nature and address it by its proper name. The overarching consciousness of nature is being referred to as Alka, while the inhabitants of the wilds are called Alka's children. Ever since your fall, you've become an envoy and are now doing what you can to aid Alka in ridding itself of the Ode'n corruption, as can be seen in the main questline that has us facing off against Lady Deora and the Torment Stag, also known as Garen Rude. However, helping Alka doesn't necessarily mean committing genocide against the Ode'n. In fact, our main objective was helping Lady Deora recover her senses. It seems that the Ode'n were once normal people that were converted into desecrating the lands of Alka only after hearing a particular melody, which I assume to be called the Ode. Those under Ode'n reign live a life of comfort, wanting not for warmth, shelter, or food, but it all comes at the cost of destroying the realm. When we fight Lady Deora, she states as much, but once we manage to get through to her, she realizes the evil that she's done, further emphasizing that this was not her own will at work. I love how Soulframe's themes are centered around the idea of corruption, cleansing, healing, and redemption. The ending of the questline perfectly encapsulates all of these themes through Deora's rebirth and Garen Root's cleansing of corruption. The game's story gives me the feeling of unity, of working for a greater good, an objective that's worth fighting for, and in response to your efforts, Garen Root gifts you with his regalia composed of a complete set of weapons, armor, and a pact. This scene really drives home the idea that throughout your time in Soulframe, you will become an avatar of the wilds, deriving your power from whatever Omen beast decides to assist you in your path to redemption. The only other story content available would be finding and interacting with the ancestors that will join your Nightfold. We've already talked about Orlick, but there's also Verminia, who will become your resident fashion designer, Tuvalkane, the depressed blacksmith who really needs to be more confident in herself, and Fen Yotar, who will augment your gear with motes. Tuvalkane's voice actor does sound familiar to me.
Share not your envoy heart with me.
I wonder where I've heard her before.
I am fine. Completely and utterly fine. Better than fine. Hale and hearty and still alive to mourn those who are not.
Next, let's talk about the world of Alka. As I previously stated, I think the world looks gorgeous and it's pretty fun to explore. There are 3 other named entities, those being Mora, Safine, and Iridis, each also representing the courage, grace, and spirit virtues of your character respectively. If you look at the day and night cycle, you realize that whenever the sun rises, you get a notification saying Mora rises or Safine glows, while whenever night falls, you get Iridis awakens. Why do we have 2 different notifications for daytime though? Well, that's because there are 2 intertwined suns orbiting the planet, Mora being the red sun, while Safine is the blue sun. When Safine glows, that means that the blue sun is the larger of the 2. Meanwhile, when Mora rises, the red sun will be larger. As of now, I can't confirm whether this mechanic will have any impact on gameplay. We're only able to explore about a quarter of the full map, and within that quarter, you'll find a handful of points of interest like mines, a dock village, a castle full of enemy soldiers, alongside small enemy encampments dotted across the map. There are these giant steel walls that prevent you from accessing the remainder of the map, and I'm not sure if these will be in the final version of the game or if they're just here for the duration of the pre-alpha. It would be cool for these gates to serve as a sort of progression checkpoint where these gates hold you off in a certain part of the map until you gather enough power to challenge the Gate Master and unlock upon defeating them. I've briefly touched upon the random events called Sparrow Tales, where you can eliminate enemy patrols, destroy mourners polluting the rivers, and intercept these blue lamp packages that are supposed to send stolen resources into the skies for collection. Of course, these things can still be done outside of Sparrow Tales, but it's always better to prioritize one of these tales as completing its objective leads to even more rewards. Initially, you'll discover dungeon entrances via these Sparrow Tales, but you can still enter these dungeons even if you don't have a Sparrow Tail for it. Thankfully, these entrances don't change locations, so you can always come back if you want more runs of the same dungeon as long as you remember where the entrances are. But other than that, the overworld does feel a bit empty as there's not much else you can do and you'll only have one Sparrow Tail active at any one time. I'm sure this will change once the game gets further along in development though. Alright, it's time to take a closer look at how the gameplay works. Combat is pretty simple. You have your main weapon, which has a single combo string. You can throw your weapon and call it back to you. You can kick to break an enemy's guard. You can block, parry, and dodge, as well as some contextual attacks for when enemies are unaware of your presence or are stunned. And you've also got 4 magical abilities at your disposal, all based off of the pact you currently have equipped. Oh, almost forgot, there are also heavy attacks for each weapon, but I'm not sure how useful these are as of yet. So far, the game has 5 weapons: a long blade, dual-wielded daggers, a bow, a halberd, and a sword and shield. You can level up a weapon by earning enough experience through combat or completing quests and Sparrow Tales while you have it equipped. The maximum rank that a weapon can reach is rank 30, and leveling one up allows you to earn skill points for that weapon type. Those points can later be slotted into that weapon's skill tree to unlock other useful abilities, like Smite, which allows for a chance to expose an enemy's soul for a short time after hitting them. Once exposed, you can grab their soul and yank it out for extra damage. If you want to max out your weapon's skill tree, however, you will have to level up multiple weapons of that type, as just maxing out my daggers to 30 did not give me enough skill points. This is where the blacksmith to Valkane comes into play. She will craft any weapons that you might need, but to do that, she will need to have all of the pieces of the blueprint for that weapon. These blueprint fragments can be found randomly in chests scattered across the overworld or in dungeons, and you can keep track of how many you've discovered by visiting to Valkane and taking a look at her crafting list. Once you find all the fragments, you'll need certain materials to craft the weapon and a good chunk of the in-game currency called Drax. But even with all of these conditions fulfilled, you will still have to wait for the crafting process to finish, as this can last for anywhere from 30 minutes to 10 hours. Yes, it's pretty much the crafting system from Warframe. You can also craft new armor, but they don't have any stats or set bonuses to speak of. I'm not sure if this is how it's supposed to be once the game is finished, or if this is only a result of the game being in pre-alpha and stats for armor sets have not been implemented yet. Crafting pacts will also fall under to Valkane's purview, and will take a maximum of 10 hours. Equipping a different pact will change the 4 magical abilities available to you. For example, the Pact of the Fae will have you wielding a bow that can shoot arrows with different effects. You can encase your enemies in stone, summon a flock of birds to attack them and build their stagger bar until they're stunned, or turn yourself invisible for a short time, allowing you to sneak behind enemy lines for a backstab. If you have enough energy, you can shoot a number of very damaging arrows that will completely obliterate your enemies. I actually think that the Pact of the Fae has the highest damaging ultimate out of the pacts available so far. If you switch to Garen Rude's pact, you'll have a spell that directly steals a chunk of HP from the enemy, healing you in turn, one that will stun enemies around you, reducing their defenses, and another that will summon a stampede of spectral stags to charge at your foes. The ultimate summons Garen Rude himself to draw the enemy's attention as well as severely debuff their defenses. These spells are extremely powerful and recharge quickly, so their use is highly incentivized. I've already mentioned earlier that dungeons can get rather big with all the random rooms and pathways that a tile set can generate, but you will have to brave their depths if you want to earn enough materials to be able to craft whatever you want. In terms of enemy variety, there's not much. You'll have your rank and file soldiers that have about 4 variants, like a swordsman, a dual wielder, an archer, and a spellcaster. There are larger elite enemies that can also serve as mini bosses, and there's also only 3 big boss enemies that I've been able to see, those being Lady Diora, the Terror Stag, and Nimrod. I found Nimrod while looking for Verminia, and let's just say that our encounters were rather brief. I do have a lot of respect for the small rank and file soldiers though, because some of them, after being defeated by you, will do anything it takes to take you down. They'll throw down their sword, kneel, and use themselves as a beacon to call down the lightning so that they can take you down with them. That's a lot of determination for your cannon fodder enemy. As you can tell, I actually like Soulframe for what it currently is, but there are things that I think need to be changed or taken a closer look at. Easiest one to point out is the fact that the tutorials are currently lacking. I get that you want to let the players go out and explore the world by themselves, but at the very least have a primer that lets them know the basic controls without having to go into the keybind settings to figure it out. The bird that serves as your guide is a bit hard to keep track of. Since the part of the map that we have at our disposal is almost all green and bright lights, it's a bit hard to see the fading light green path that the sparrow leaves behind for you to follow. Perhaps enhancing its visibility in some way, like, I don't know, making it a shimmering blue would be a good idea, something that just makes it easier to see and follow. The map itself is fine, but I would love to see an overlay map being added for dungeon exploration, much like you have in Path of Exile, as you can easily get lost with all of the twists and turns within, and with it, you will more easily be able to keep track of places you've already looted. Speaking of loot, can we please get rid of the slow animations that have you kneeling down to pick up whatever loot dropped from the enemies or whenever we find chests? I know Soulframe is supposed to be a slower game than Warframe, but I don't think we need to slow down this part of the game. Oh, and since I mentioned Nimrod before, allow me to bring him back to the front again. I like this guy. He has a thunderous, booming voice, and he literally comes down from the sky in a flash of lightning. This is an amazing boss entrance, but when I immediately one-shot him, that was anticlimactic as hell. I remember taking a look at the Nimrod fight when they presented it for the first time at TennoCon, and they had an entire choreographed fight take place, which made me assume it would be a decently difficult fight. Lo and behold, it couldn't have been easier. Yes, I used the ultimate from the Pact of the Fae, but still, I didn't expect that much damage. I don't know if I was over-leveled for that fight or the boss stats weren't tweaked enough, but it really was a disappointing fight. And the same can be said for the Sparrowtail that has you fighting Nimrod again in the overworld. It throws a few normal enemies at you, and when Nimrod arrives, I blast him with the ultimate and I'm done. Lastly, there's something about Soulframe that's confusing me, and it's linked to my previous argument about killing Nimrod too easily. It's not something that I would say is a negative about the game, but it raises some questions nonetheless. Soulframe is a game about killing enemies and looting resources for crafting, but it's also a game that is trying to develop a slower, more intricate melee combat system. You're not supposed to zoom across the map like you're able to in Warframe, yet I can't help but feel that the game is actively incentivizing me to move as fast as possible through encounters. The spells you have are pretty powerful, to the point that they're able to outright kill multiple enemies in one shot. In this type of combat environment, why would I bother getting close to attack with my weapons when spells deal more than enough damage and recharge quickly besides? It feels like Soulframe has these contradicting philosophies when it comes to game design, where on one hand, it wants you to engage in melee combat, dodging and parrying and so on, but on the other hand, it also gives you a revolver with almost infinite ammo. Do you see why this is confusing to me? Then come the dungeons, which have corridors and rooms with varying degrees of verticality. You know you need resources for crafting, so you're dedicated to scouring every room for any potential loot, yet it feels so slow going through it. Perhaps we'll be able to further customize our loadout with movement speed to make things faster, but that makes me think that we'll just end up with another Warframe game, but with a fantasy skin. I figured that if Soulframe is to stand out from its bigger sister, it would have to have a slower and more precise melee combat system. People actually thought we'd be getting Dark Souls level combat, and no, the combat system currently available is not anywhere close to being a Souls-like combat system, and I don't think we'll ever get one even when the game is complete. But if they make Soulframe a slower experience, they really need to take a look at how large dungeons can get, and maybe tweak the algorithm generating these dungeons to have fewer empty rooms and pack the ones that are actually important a little closer together. Like I said before though, this is not something negative about the game, it just feels like two different philosophies butting heads against one another. Again, pre-alpha, we don't have the full picture yet. Everything I mentioned before might actually fit in quite nicely once we have all the missing pieces to the puzzle. Regardless, that's about as deep as I can dive into Soulframe. What are your thoughts on Soulframe so far? Personally, my interest is peaked, but there's still a lot to go until this game's full release. For now though, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and sub to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, have a good one. Hey, you made it to the end. Congratulations. You didn't skip the whole video to get here, right? Right? Of course you didn't. You're not the kind of person who would do that. Anyway, thanks for sticking around till the end, and now that you're here, we can go ahead and talk about the giveaway. I've got not one, not two, but 3 codes that will give you access to the Soulframe Preludes. If you want to enter the giveaway, all you have to do is like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You need all 3 to be eligible for the giveaway. The winners will be randomly selected and will be announced starting a week from when this video goes live. That's it. Good luck to you all.